Hello and welcome to Marginal Support, where support is anything but marginal. My name is Andre Lindy, and today I have a guest who I admire quite a bit for what she's trying to do in the space. Ines, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
For people who don't know, could you please introduce yourself and tell everyone what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been, I always hate having to say this because it makes me feel old. I've been in the customer support industry or CX industry for about 18 years. And I've done pretty much everything. So I've been an IC, I've been a team lead, I've been a QA specialist the past 8 year-ish. I've been specializing in QA and I wrote a book on it. And the question, what does it mean to have a good conversation within a support context, is part of that job, obviously. And the more I dug my hands into that question, the more I started to wonder, like, is there something universally true for all of us? Like, this is a job as any other. So are there any commonalities between what we do? I started doing research, reading a lot of papers, and came to the conclusion that actually, no, we don't. No, we don't have we don't have universally accepted words and terms and things for the actual behaviors. We're looking at a lot of outcome-based results. So think CSAT and NPS and average handle time, that kind of stuff. But what we're not doing is looking at the actual behaviors that lead to these outcomes. And that's what I wanted to know. So that's what I've been focusing on.
I think that's pretty important. I mean, because how often do you see on job descriptions says like maintain high CSAT or average time, blah blah blah. Like, but then and when it gets to the actual hard requirements, was it's like knows how to have difficult conversations. Okay, well, a lot of these difficult
What does that
conversations,
mean?
yeah. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious about this book. What made you want to write the book, and like how did you basically kick off that? Because writing a book can be a very difficult process.
Yes. So there's a couple of things that I wrote actually. So the customer support QA playbook is essentially the framework that I use with my clients. I'm a QA consultant. I've helped companies kind of figure out the answer to that question of what does good look like for us. But I kept repeating myself and people kept asking me the same questions over and over again, and I was like, you know what, if I could just write it down and give you a book, you can do it. So that's how the book came to be. And then more recently I wrote a white paper titled The Conversational Integrity Model. That is separate and way more, it's an academic paper. So it's not as easy to go through as the book. I'm planning on turning it into a book at some point in the future, but for now it's meant as like the foundational piece of what I hope eventually becomes us being able to get a degree in customer support. That would be amazing. But in order to do that, we need a lot of research and we need a lot of papers and a lot of people having thoughts about these things in an academic sense. So those are the two different things.
Speaking of those certifications and degrees, two questions for you, well, two observations. So what are your thoughts on the CXPA? It's a certification that some people get and some people say, okay, here's the support certification. So that's my first question. We'll talk about that. Then I have another part I want to talk to you about.
Sure. Okay, so I know that there are existing, like, get a certification, take a course and get a certification. The issue I have with that is that it's a very select subgroup of people, typically in a very specific area of work, a specific industry, that have created these credentials and the benchmarks for it. When you start looking at it from an academic standpoint, I mean, this is why I have gone back to school, because without university affiliation, I can't publish my papers in journals, uh, you know? And that is needed because there's a peer review system. That means it's not just me having ideas about this, it's us as professionals within the space and people who have opinions about certain elements of what we're doing. They get to review and have opinions on it, so you have a more evidence-based and universally acceptable terminology, if you will. Both are very valid. It's just about how do we want to perceive ourselves as an industry? Do we want to remain the kind of job where, you can get maybe a certification here and there, but that's not really going to be a differentiator when trying to look for a job or get better pay or be seen as not a cost center within the entire scope of an organization? You need more, in my opinion, more professionalism, and going the academic route is what gets us there, I think.
It's almost like you're saying there's some scientificness in there and peer review and actually having people know what they talk about and saying, no, this is complete BS, or no, you're right here. Shocker. I mean,
I know. Who knew? It's science. Wow.
The other one that when I was actually investigating this myself, and when I was looking to get a master's degree, I kept looking. I kept seeing masters of sciences in information technology or anything, and there's only one master's I found today, and it's at Michigan State University, and it actually is a master's in CX. But the problem is that this master's is focused more on the customer success side and not the support side. So even though CX is starting to merge, we are still at this point where we're seeing almost like this cutoff line between support and CS. How do you feel that we try to get past that, where there's always been like this uneasiness between the two?
So it's funny if you think about it, because there's other industries that have had a similar kind of tipping point. Nursing is a big one. And what it requires is for a practitioner to go, you know what, I'm so fed up with the fact that everyone else around me in my industry is able to go to school and get certified and be a professional. And I'm like, I don't know, you can drag someone off of the street and they can do the same job as I can. That's not true, right? And so I think in order for us to change that view and to change how we navigate that merging of the worlds, so to speak, I do think we need to have a very clear idea of what it is that we're doing in the first place. Because if we can't name that, if we can't title that in any way, shape, or form, it's very difficult to see the pitfalls in the road. So yeah, I think it does start with let's do the research. Let's have actual discussions about what it takes to have a universally accepted terminology, vocabulary for this. Because you're right, a lot of the things that exist are focused on the outcomes. Do we retain the customer? Are they happy? Are they helped in a way that we deem fast enough? And do they agree with that? And what we need to do is start looking at the behaviors that lead to those outcomes. And that's a conversation that I think now is the time to have it, especially in the world where AI becomes more important as well.
So the way I was first exposed to you was when I saw your post on LinkedIn, and then I saw your website. And I'm curious, how is this quiz on your website trying to help people move forward to these difficult conversations, or this shared language that we're trying to build?
Right. So the free assessment that you're referring to, I think, it's built in a way that it's multiple choice. The full assessment that I do with people also includes you having to write your own answer rather than pick from a list. But it is to demonstrate that all four options that you get are essentially correct. There's no wrong choice. It is just to demonstrate how conversations can break down in very predictable manners. I've identified 10 different competencies across 3 different layers that will help you understand what actually happens within a conversation and what your responsibility as an agent is within that environment, and how to prevent things from breaking down. So teaching people like this is kind of how things flow, and if you make a misstep in this area, these are the consequences. I have a lot of jargon behind it because I came up with a lot of new terminologies, but a lot of people obviously can't read my mind and have not maybe heard of the things that I've been doing. So I can't just go, well, you need to get better at face acknowledgement. You probably don't know what face acknowledgement means, so it doesn't help people if I just use the terms. I need to demonstrate, and that's the purpose of that free assessment.
What has been people's reactions to it? People, I'm not talking about, the random person off the street. People that are actually in this industry have gone through it.
Mm-hmm.
Have people even got defensive, or people said, this is great? What have people's reaction been? Because sometimes people don't like change.
The beauty, I think, of what I've put together is not that I'm changing things. I'm not telling you anything that is something you're not already familiar with, that you're not already doing. So what I've encountered, I can't think of anyone who's had a negative response. The only response that I've had was recognition and, oh my God, yes, I run into this every day of my work week, and I never knew that it actually had a name. I'll give you a great example. I have come up with something that is called interaction tractability. And it consists of entry tractability and trajectory tractability. It's a term I came up with and I cannot pronounce it. It's amazing. What it says, the entry tractability, is what is the opening state of this conversation? Is it recoverable? Yes or no? And to what degree? And I'm not saying is there a specific category of problem, but what is the emotional state of the customer? What is the consequence for them if the problem isn't resolved? How well can this conversation be recovered through skilled intervention by the agent? That's the entry point. And then we have the trajectory tractability. I'll get there eventually. That describes how well the conversation recovers from that entry point onwards. And that is where the agent's skill set lives. It happens there. And this is something when I tell people this and they haven't heard of it before, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. That actually describes my experience. And that's the point. That's where I want to get to with this.
Yeah, I think, like most people, I've struggled with this as well, where I can tell you, oh, I've worked with these difficult problems, and then people ask, well, how do you do that? And I'm just like, I just do.
Vibes.
it's just innate knowledge. I don't know. I mean, but support is not for everyone, but it is something that we've learned all these skills throughout our lives, mm-hmm. and then we just put them there, and then when people ask how do we do it, it's hard for us. So what would you say are some of the aha moments people have had, or some of the terms where people said, I never knew I was doing that until you told me I was doing that?
That's a good question. Okay. I already mentioned face acknowledgement. Let me run you through what that is real fast. Because it's essentially the basis of the integrity model. There is a theory that says face is not your actual face, but something that you an image of yourself that you take into social interactions. Like, you have a face, I have a face. This is where losing face and saving face comes from. And I want to protect my face. I want to be seen as a capable human being. I want to be perceived as autonomous, not doing things wrong, etc. And in order to do that defensive mechanism, I have certain things that I can do to protect myself. Face protective actions. In a regular interaction, like you and I talking right now, you could be incredibly rude to me, and I can go, you know what? I'm just gonna leave, or I'm gonna tell you to F off, or there's a whole lot of things that I can do in order to protect myself, to protect my own image. Now, in a customer support environment, we don't have access to these things because customer is king, right? We don't have access to ways to really protect ourselves without consequences. On the other hand, the customer is able to do this almost without recourse. Of course, we sometimes fire customers, but we all have these experiences of being treated horribly by clients, and the consequences being part of the job. Is that something you recognize?
I mean, absolutely. There have been times where I've had people F-bombing me, cussing at me, and I think one of the best examples I can think of was, I remember at an interview, an old boss explained to me the concept of Mount Anger, where you have this person who, even before they get on the phone with you, they, at work, at home, they spill food on their shirt. They get upset.
Yes.
On the way to work, flat tire, get even more upset. Try to go in the presentation won't load. And so eventually when they do reach out to someone, they're at this tipping point. And so then as the support person, since they cannot see you, they only hear you, they just let all this aggression out onto you. And as us as support people, we have to be their guide down this mountain, that we first have to take the brunt of that anger from them. Correct. And so that's what I'm hearing you saying, is that they can yell at us, but we cannot yell back at them.
Correct. And the thing is, if you do not have access to these face protective acts, especially if you identify with the role to a degree where it's not policy saying what or dictating what you are saying, it's you saying, well, I would never talk to my clients this way. It's not, the policy tells me that I shouldn't be talking to my client this way. I, as a human being, shouldn't be doing this. And that means the damage that you're receiving goes directly into you. It's not the role that receives the damage, it's you as a person. And when we look at things like burnout, for example, the burnout rates within support are huge, but the standard burnout intervention methods don't really seem to work like they do in other professions, right? A standard intervention method is take time off, go not do this specific job, and then come back once you're recharged. And what you're seeing with a lot of support folks is they come back and they immediately get burnt out again. And that's because that specific damage isn't depletive. It doesn't deplete the resource that you have. It's corrosive. It damages the self. Which means it's not your own failure that the intervention doesn't work, which I've found a lot of people feel like, this is supposed to work. Everyone is telling me that this is supposed to work, and I just can't do it. It's not you personally. It's the kind of work that we do. It causes structural damage. Did I manage to do the oh my god thing?
No, it is very interesting, because it's the way you're describing things. It is very much at a psychological level, and when you think of support, you don't even kind of bring these things together. But I think this also explains why then, when you look at almost every support team, I dare you to find a support team that's not close knit together.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why is that we have to protect each other from
Yes.
this trauma that we get. So it's almost a strange shared trauma. But
Mm-hmm.
then you've probably seen it where then the way support people will make jokes about the clients they don't like or the inside jokes. It is a very close knit bunch. But
Yep.
so is that I wouldn't say is that a bad thing, but how does that shape the way people are then that we are so protective of our people then when we're in this job?
Actually, from the research that I've done, and I have to say that this is preliminary evidence and not, there's not been a huge uh, longevity research done that's happening, but it takes time. But from the preliminary evidence that I'm finding, what you're describing is actually vitally important in as an intervention method. It's called institutional backing or institutional support, where your colleagues in that scenario are actually restoring a little bit of what you were not able to do within that conversation. So venting to your colleagues about a difficult situation is very similar to the face preserving act when you're in that conversation with a customer. So having that space, having that tight knit community, and having a manager who frequently not just gives you the negative performance reviews like, hey, this is how you can succeed, but especially, hey, you know what, you're awesome. Actually, these are things that I've seen you do that are fantastic, and you're really smart, and you're really good at solving problems. That restores some of that damage that we've accumulated. So yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because it's really important.
So I'm going to shift gears a little here because you brought
Mm-hmm.
up AI a little bit ago, and you
Yep.
know, if we didn't talk about it, well, what are we doing here? I mean, come on, people. Um, so one thing that I am curious though is with AI coming in and basically eating the lunch of a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
skills we thought used to be needed in support, which maybe they
Right.
aren't. How is this affecting people's, their personality or their sense of being now that the role is fundamentally shifting because of AI?
I love this question, and I have a pretty solid answer on it, I think. But it goes back to we need to understand the role that we're doing. We need to have names for them in order to understand what our new position in this changed landscape actually is. We are not becoming less valuable in a world where AI is snapping up all of these tickets that can be resolved through information retrieval and process, right? That's a thing we're never going to be changing back to how it was. We just have to adapt. The thing is, though, and this is what has come up in my research very clearly, is that there are certain things that AI, as sophisticated as it gets, will never be able to do. And it specifically sits in the relationship building. It specifically sits in that you just mentioned, what did you call it? Mount Anger?
Yeah.
In order to bring someone down from the mountain, right, you need to reestablish a sense of cooperation. That's where de-escalation begins. That sense of cooperation it hinges on your level of sincerity. In order to be sincere or be perceived as sincere, especially with someone who's already flooded, who's already on top of Mount Anger, their ability to sense whether or not you are sincere is incredible. It's like walking a very fine line. In order to be perceived as sincere, you, as a human being, need to be able to embody the feeling of sincerity. You need to feel it. And the one thing that AI cannot do, it can mimic, but it cannot feel. It cannot do the feeling thing that is necessary. And the beautiful thing is that the higher the emotional stakes are, if that is met with exceptional support, the rate at which your chance of positive CSAT scores. I formulated that sentence weird. The higher the emotion and the better the response equal an explosively better chance at getting positive CSAT scores. And every CSAT score, 1 point CSAT score that you improve upon equals more revenue for the business. So it's not that we're getting less valuable to the industry by any means whatsoever. We're getting less volume, sure, but the work that we do is increasingly more valuable to the overall business.
One thing that I've seen in this industry, and I would challenge you this, have you ever met a support person that is not empathic? I've never met someone in this industry. I've met some people that are jerks, but
Right.
for the most part, if you're working this job, you have to have some kind of empathy for both the coworkers you're working with and the customers you're talking with. And but that's one of those skills that it's you can't really train on in a lots of way. So how do you explain that people that come into this role all share, for the most part, these certain traits that they bring in that are core and vital to being a good person in the sport industry?
So I think empathy is a misnomer, because what we do is not necessarily demonstrating empathy, it's emotional calibration. So it's not that I feel this sense of duty or what have you. It's you come in at a certain emotional level and I calibrate my responses to match and achieve cooperation. And so the people who are drawn to this, we're not wrong in these job descriptions where it's like, oh, you're a people person and you just really like solving problems, please. That might be true, but the skill set is emotional calibration. It's cooperative reentry or facilitating cooperative reentry. It is having systemic awareness, so not just okay, this person is presenting me with a refund request and the policy says that you're 2 days out of the refund window, so the answer is going to be no. It's okay, this person, this situation requires judgment, a judgment call from me as a human being. It requires me to step outside of this thing. These are the skill sets, not the empathy. Doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't explain what I'm doing. It doesn't explain the behaviors that I'm doing. So I do think that a lot of people get drawn to the industry because it's challenging, but not just because they're empathic people. I think everyone is empathic.
I would say that's true unless you're a sociopath, but you know that's
Right.
that's besides the point there. So earlier back, you said it'd be great if eventually we could have a degree in support.
Yes.
I want you to kind of just play with that a little and just tell me what would you envision that is? How would you envision maybe it's the course structure or what we would be learning? Because this fascinates me. I would love to think, okay, how could we take what is support and distill it into education?
You're asking me this as if I've not been thinking about this extensively for a while. I think it's very similar to marketing, for example. I'm actually currently studying communication. So I'm looking at marketing communication and corporate communication, social media, that kind of thing. And you would think, okay, well, marketing, okay, you market your products. So what is there to talk about when you're doing an entire degree in marketing, right? But they're looking at, okay, well, how do we identify our target audience? if I compare that to what a CX degree would look like, is okay, well, how do we identify the range of questions that we're getting? How do we tackle certain differences between the different industries? Because a software development business requires a different way of talking to customers than a B2C company would require, right? The level of questions are different. What makes them different? What are de-escalation tactics? What are how do we extrapolate business intelligence? Because that is, surprise, talking to your actual customers will lead to you actually finding things out about them. You know, how do you do that though? There are so many things that we can do to put together a curriculum that makes sense, that would actually level up everyone that is working within this industry. But also, one of my best friends is an optometrist, glasses. And I was talking to her about the burnout thing. And she was like, you know what? Actually, I experienced this in my job. And I was like, fascinating. Tell me more about this. And she was like, yeah, because I have an element of customer-facing work. It's not the thing that I studied, but it's definitely part of my day-to-day job. And I spoke to another friend of mine who is a vet, treats cats, dogs, cows, what have you. And she said the same thing. And I was like, okay, all of these different degrees, all of these different curriculums, they focus on a job that has this customer-facing element to it, but none of them have a class or a lecture on, okay, well, how do you handle customers then? We can tell them, we can explain this to them, we can be that force. Imagine having people who are educated, who have a degree in this area, going to give guest lectures. That would be, I mean, that, hopefully in my lifetime at some point. But
I mean,
that is
that
my
idea.
Go ahead.
That idea just popped in my head when you were just talking about that. I mean, when I was in journalism school, we had broadcasters come in and give guest lectures.
Right.
We would have retired reporters come in. Now imagine if you had the head of CX for a company coming in and giving a guest lecture, or if you had, someone on the engineering side that came in and said, okay, here's how an engineer thinks and here's how we interpret clients' requests. I mean, the way I envision it, now that we're talking about this, the way I envision a degree like this, it would be maybe a little part psychology, a little part sociology, maybe a little tech in there, just because obviously we're in tech, but it would be this glorious degree that combines so many different areas that maybe people are curious about, but then they could have it all in one area.
And imagine what that would do for the work itself. Imagine what that would do for us as an industry, to have that knowledge. Where would that take us? What could we do with that? Especially if we're looking at all of these AI systems, right? They learn from us. We're the source material when it comes to when is it good and when is it not good. If we are educated, if we have a good understanding of this is the thing that we're doing, these are the behaviors that work and these are the ones that don't, and this is what I need to do to get to a specific goal, regardless or irregardless of which industry that I'm working in, the AI models are going to learn from that. And they're going to take it further, and we can optimize, and we can be more cost effective, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reasons for why we should be doing this just keep expanding, in my opinion.
It is truly fascinating. I mean, I could talk forever on this topic. Honestly, I've had a wonderful time with this, but unfortunately, I do have to. It is the time where we're starting to wrap up the show. So one question that I ask all my guests at the end of the show is a line I used to use when I would close my show. And so I'm going to say it to you, and then I'm going to ask, what does it mean to you? So what I would say when I would close the show is that support isn't just a job. Support is a mindset. What does that mean to you?
I think that puts us in danger of backsliding into, well, it's just a personality trait and not learnable, coachable, teachable skills. I think we need to be very careful about how we phrase these things. I like the sentiment, but I would worry that it would keep us in place rather than move us forward.
See, that is an answer I've never gotten before, and I appreciate that. So, but that's why I do this. We talk with people, we get different responses, and we learn from each other. So, Ines, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. I enjoyed our conversation a lot, and I cannot wait for the day when I see you as a guest lecturer or a professor of CX.
I told my son this the other day, and he was like, well, what are your plans? Are you going to become like, I don't know, are you going to get a master's degree? And I was like, you know what? Dr. Mom sounds pretty cool, so I think I'm going to go and do that. So there you have it.
He's calling your bluff. So
All
right,
we'll see.
Well, I can't wait to see how they can. Well, thank you for joining me today, and I hope to talk again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.